we will begin with the lecture. Let me show the present, that is, let me start with the presentation. So I will just go for the slides, and then we will continue with the portion that we had left last time. So last time we had started with the evolutionary history, and for this topic we have mentioned that we know your flora, like know how it is. So we are approaching towards that, but the initial part is there in this part only. So we will continue from where we left last time, where we had seen the different organisms that we get, that we saw how the life was formed, what were the conditions earlier, and I wanted you to know about the Gondwan area, which is most important for us from the point of view of plants. So we had seen till this part. No, we had been ahead of this. Yeah, we had seen these pictures too. So till here we had seen all the organisms that were there. So the earlier were the simple flagellates, which were almost naked, no cell wall. Some had, but most of them were without cell wall, just mass of protoplasm, and that single cell was performing all the functions. So what we have to remember again, that earlier this single cell had the capacity to do all the functions. Everything was done by that one cell only. But as evolution took place, as diversity increased, the single cell became multicellular. So we got the colonial form, where many single cells aggregated, but a definite shape was there for these colonies. In this also, though a colony was there, all the cells had the capacity to perform each and every function. That means the respiration, nutrition, photosynthesis, reproduction, which is most important for the continuity of the race. So all was done by a single cell. Then came the filamentous form. In the filamentous form, in the earlier filaments, the forms which were there, all the cells were similar. All the cells performed all the function. Though they were in a single filament, though they were in a single sheet, each one had its own entity. Then as again advancement took place, this we see in Spirogyra, where all the cells perform all the function. Then as we come a little higher, where we see Neulothrix, there we get division of labor, where the basalmost cell became the holdfast. It anchored the filament to the substratum, and that did not have any chloroplast, and it only did of anchorage, the function of anchorage. And the topmost cell was called as the apical cell. This continued later in the higher plants also, where we get a holdfast in the form of the roots, and we get the apical cell, which is the apical meristeme, the cells which continuously divide to form the entire plant. So this we have to remember again, see how the diversity took place. From a single cell performing all the functions, we got further division of labor. In this division of labor, the jobs were distributed in the different cells. Though primitive in Neulothrix, as we said, primitive, though every cell had the capacity, but still there was differentiation. So this we see, it continued further in the higher plants, where it got well established. So we had seen till this slide, and I wanted to mention about the division of labor, which is very important, because in our body also we have the same thing. Different cells perform different function. The cell of one organ cannot go and do the function of another organ. So that division of labor is very much there in all higher organisms. So then what we see further, we had finished till the slide, the picture part. Now we go further. Now in this, see what we see. These groups which were there in the sea, in the water medium, aquatic medium. We got the brown alga, the phaeophyta, we got the red alga, the rhodophyta, and the green alga, the chlorophyta. Out of these three, what we see, the phaeophyta and rhodophyta stopped growing, evolving. They were, as they were earlier, the same thing is seen today also. No further development took place in that direction, where the phaeophytes have a different pigmentation, that is the fucoxanthin is there. The rhodophyta had different pigmentation. Though chlorophyll was there to perform photosynthesis, these other pigments, they dominated, which gave the brown color and the red color. But what is seen? These stopped evolving. They did not grow further. They did not become extinct also, but they did not grow any further. The next line, chlorophyta, we see that probably gave rise to the present day higher plants. So that persisted. The chlorophyta evolved further. The green pigment, that is a dominating green pigment which was there, that evolved further, and we get the higher plants. Then we come to the another group, that is fungi, which we earlier we used to consider this in the plant kingdom only. But this fungi is very different. Its cell wall is different. It doesn't have chloroplast, but still it is living. It has a nucleus. The nucleus divides like the normal other cells. Also, it is performing nutrition. It has its own nutrition. How it takes it? It is heterotrophic, either saprophytic, living on dead organic material, or parasitic, living on living organisms. But it is taking its nourishment. And from where the nourishment is taken? From the other organic matter. And how is that organic matter formed? It is formed from the taking the energy from the sun. So that sun source, we have to remember always. The sun is the source which gives the energy, which is transformed from one form to another in different organisms. So fungi, not autotrophic, but living, having its own nourishment. That we have to remember. So this, we see that this took place due to degeneration of the autotrophic mechanism or the machinery, and then it continued to live. And the fungi also are very much evolved. If we just hang a strip of cellophane tape in the air, and after you see it after some time under the microscope, you will see numerous spores attached to it. Now also when we breathe in a number of spores. But because of our immune system, these spores do not harm us. But there are numerous, that is, the number is very large of these fungi spores. And the fungi spores, wherever suitable condition is there, they start growing, they start germinating. Then
Borkar madam, I will request you, Borkar madam, I will request you to go on slide presentation mode. PPT. Yeah, no, so that the screen will be enlarged. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't do that. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I'll do that. Let me reach that slide.
Yes, now it is correct. Thank you.
Yeah. And I didn't do it. Right. Sorry. Yeah. So then we come to the land plants. From chlorophyta in the water, we are coming towards the land plants. And that land plants we see, which we commonly call as the ferns. The Psilopsida, Lycopsida, Sphenopsida, Helicopsida. The Psilopsida are the most primitive. They were just cylindrical plants with a few appendages, no leaves, nothing. And the system, the vascular system also was very simple. Then we get the gymnosperms, and the gymnosperms, we come to the higher plants, the angiosperms. We'll see them, we'll see this in more descriptive manner. So now next what we see, the early land plants represented today by the bryophytes, mosses, liverworts, hornworts, possessed two important features that allowed them to live on land. So again, what we have seen earlier, water was the best medium, water was the mother of all these organisms. So the plants were not, the organisms were not ready to leave this water. Also, the conditions were very harsh on the outside because of the ultraviolet rays, the radiations that came from the cosmic radiations that came from the outside were harmful. But then, as the evolution took place, as diversity was increasing, the plants moved towards land.
Madam, we can't hear you.
Can't hear me? Hello?
Yes, now yes.
Now
we
yes?
can.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Okay, now I will continue with what I was talking. How much was missed?
Madam, no, you are very clear. The person who said might be having the internet.
Okay, okay. So I'm heard. Okay, okay, okay.
You continue, madam.
Okay, okay. So what was necessary when it came to land, when it came towards the land, when it came on the land, remaining hydrated? That was necessary for all, because water is the most important thing which is needed by all the organisms. Without water, nobody can survive. Not a single organism can survive. So what was the major development that took place? The first point, a waxy cuticle to protect against desiccation. So that was needed. That was very necessary for this diversity to continue. What is seen? These organisms which were amphibians, more towards water, but still on land. So these had a cuticle, a special layer which comes on the epidermis. Now again, we have to remember that when in water, every cell would perform all the function, so that absorption also would take place from all the surfaces of the cell. And it was easy to perform the function. But as it came towards land, because of this protective nature necessary, the cuticle was covering the entire plant body. So then what is seen? This cuticle is waxy. It has a substance called as suberin. So you can see how the chemical evolution also took place. The need was there to protect or to prevent desiccation. So this cuticle was deposited with the suberin material, which is impervious to water. It did not allow the water to go outside and the plant remained hydrated. So this cuticle was first secreted, was first present when it came towards land. And the second point, which is again an important one, protection of gametes and embryos in a protective jacket made up of cells. So here gametes are very vulnerable, that we know. They are subjected, if they are subjected to any cosmic ray, any intense ray, they will undergo changes. Mutations take place, they get damaged, they get destroyed. So these embryos, when they are in their growing stage, the gametes, when they are in their formation stage, they require protection, which was given by the protective jacket. Now, if you're familiar with the sex organs of these bryophytes, they are called as the antheridium, the male sex organ, and archegonium, the female sex organ. If you have seen the picture of it, you will see the club-shaped antheridium. We'll be seeing the picture further. The club-shaped antheridium covered by a cuticle, covered by a jacket layer, and the archegonium, which is flask-shaped, also covered by a jacket layer. So these got protection. So when the land plants, when they came towards land, the first one which we get are the bryophytes, which are the mosses, the liverworts, and the hepatics. So here what we see, the liverworts, we have the hepaticaceae, which is called, we have the rixia and marchantia. These are just like a sheet of leaf, few cell in thickness, attached to the soil. So again, as I said, division of labor started with Eulothrix. where it is seen coming in the plants, land plants, where the rhizoids are developed. They are like roots, but not so well developed. Only a few cells forming a tubular structure and going towards the substratum to get the nourishment. Green chloroplast is there, so performing function of photosynthesis, so autotrophic in nature, which is seen in the land plants. So gradually, these liverworts further evolved into the hornworts, that are the Anthoceros. Anthoceros is a small group which generally it is seen at high altitudes. We'll see these growing at a high altitude, and then come the mosses. The mosses which we commonly have on the brick walls, on the moist surfaces, the funaria, which you be seeing, especially in the rainy season. Now, again, one more important thing in this diversity is that when the plants, when the life started, when the green plants started in the water, all were haploid. In the beginning, all were haploid, having only one set of chromosome. When sexual reproduction started, the diploid condition was considered to be more stable. And then we see the diploid condition becoming more and more continued into the life cycle. But it didn't happen in one day or in one organism. Gradually, it went on changing. So here in the bryophytes, we see a little more modification is there, in which we note there are two generations. One is called as the gametophyte generation, and the other is called as the sporophyte generation. Now, this gametophyte generation is dominant in these mosses. The haploid stage is dominant, but sporophyte stage also is there, which is coming on the gametophyte. So sporophyte immediately does not become independent. Earlier, it remains as a semi-parasite on these gametophytes, and then it develops the spores. The spores again will be haploid, which will give rise to gametophytic generation again. So here we see, here we get distinct alternation of generation, which we also see in the higher plants. We'll come to that later, but we see it also. So here what you will note, look at this. This is the gametophyte. At the apex, the sex organs are formed. I told you the club-shaped antheridium, the male sex organ, and the flask-shaped archegonium, which is giving the protection to the developing embryo. The embryo will be forming in the archegonium. And then this archegonium, the zygote which is there, diploid, so the diploid condition is obtained, that will grow and it will give rise to, that is the meiosis will take place, reduction division will take place, and the spores form will be haploid, which will give rise to the haploid generation. So remember that gametophyte is dominant, sporophyte is semi-parasitic. It grows on top of the gametophyte. It grows on top of the gametophyte. So here again, a number of spores are formed. These spores immediately do not develop into the leafy structure. It is again filamentous. So that filamentous nature is showing what? Its affinity towards the earlier group. That is the algae which are there in the water. So that stage we get in the higher plants also. At some stage they resemble the earlier stage, that is the algae. The diversity comes when it is coming towards the land. So the leafy nature came. Now also, as the plant grew up, it can be up to 2 to 3 inches tall, so that every part is now requiring nourishment. So these rhizoids which are picking up the food material by absorption, that has to be passed on to every part of the plant. But in these bryophytes, we do not get the vascular tissue. As we get for the higher plants, that vascular tissue is not there. Only few cells in the middle become slightly thick-walled than the other. See, still it is all thin-walled only. There is no thickness, there is no hard cell. Only little, few cells in the middle, they form a column and they become thick-walled by and function like that of a conducting tissue. They are not forming xylem or phloem. Just the food material is passed through the cells from one cell to the other by the process, as we know, that is the osmosis. That is water moving from its higher concentration to its lower concentration. So this we see it happens where no vascular tissue, no thick tissue, no dead tissue, no hard cell tissue is there. All the cells are only thin walled. But these form the major groups. Still we get a large number of mosses when you go in the moist areas, when you go in the dense forest. You will get mats of this, and all majority of them, the mosses have beautiful colors. The capsules which are there in which the spores develop, the capsule which is a part of the sporophyte which grows on top of the gametophyte, you will see this. Look how many are there, and each one is having numerous spores, and all these spores will be dispersed, and all the spores have the capacity to germinate, and they germinate wherever suitable condition is available. So mosses, they came first to the land, but gradually the development took place. So the first thing needed was cuticle and the protection to the embryos. Then further what we see, relatively early in the history of plants, the evolution of efficient fluid conducting systems consisting of xylem and phloem solved the problem of water and food transport throughout the plant body. Means what? Vascularization took place. So this, if you remember, we had seen the eras that were there. This started, the vascular condition started in the Mesozoic period. In the Mesozoic period, we have the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous. In this, what is seen, before that actually it started in the Carboniferous area, the era or the period we say, the era is Paleozoic. In the late Paleozoic, these vascular plants, they started, became dominant in the Triassic period. So what is seen here, that what was the necessity? As I said earlier, in the Psilopsida, cylindrical plants were there. Appendages were not much, just coming from the base to the top, which needed food material. So the xylem and phloem did develop in the middle, but they were primitive again. So this we see that the next step, first step was cuticle and embryo protection, and the next step is xylem and phloem formation, which is the vascular tissue developing, which was needed further for the diversity. Then another thing which came into existence, the ability to synthesize lignin. What is lignin? Lignin is a plant polymer that is having a number of molecules in it, which is incorporated into the cell wall of supporting and water conducting cells. Now this also was a pivotal step in the evolution, which was very essential, because these plants, they cannot run away. They have to be in one place only. So all the time they are subjected to the harshness of the surrounding, harshness of the environment. It might be stormy, it might be rainy, it might be hot, but these cannot run away. So nature itself, God itself, we can say, has provided protection to them to overcome this shearing and bending stress. And how it is obtained? It is by this tough tissue, which is lignin. So this lignin, it gives rigidity to the cell walls. It is deposited on the walls of the cells, and the cells become thick. This lignin again is impervious to water, so that the evaporation is stopped, the desiccation is stopped, and protection is given to the plant body. So here lignin adds rigidity to cell walls, making it possible for vascularized plants to reach great heights. This is also essential because a tube-like system is formed, a pipe-like system is formed, which has to be continuous from the base to the top. If it collapses in the middle, if it gets pinched in the middle, the flow will stop. It also doesn't have many, just like we have a bypass surgery. If one is blocked, the bypass surgery is done, and another channel is obtained so that the heart is given the necessary nourishment. But in plants also to some extent it does happen like that, but it is very essential that the food material is in a continuous form which is raised from the roots against gravity to the top of the leaf where it is going. So this vascularization was, that is, it was affected with the formation of the lignin. The lignin got deposited on the walls, which is in different forms we get it. It is deposited in different forms so that the rigidity is given to these cells and the protection. So this is another pivotal step or pivotal step which we see in the course of evolution. So this picture is showing the conducting tissue, how it is tube-like, forming the xylem and the phloem. This picture is of the phloem, where you see the tissue, the sieve plates are there through which transport takes place. So again, the transport is controlled. It is not that it is coming in one go. Gradually it is transported through the protoplasm, through the strands of the protoplasm. So you can see how much control is there in the nature also, in the plants also. The cells will be damaged if they get it suddenly. So gradual conduction is there for the passage of the food material. So we see the xylem and the phloem which form the vascular tissue. The xylem, as I said, is having the tough tissue lignin, but phloem doesn't have it. Phloem does have the supporting sclerenchyma cells, which are the lignified cells of the plant body. So that we see in the anatomy part, where we see the internal morphology, where the cells get modified as they perform various functions, again division of labor. So now what we see further, these seedless vascular plants, commonly we call them as ferns, dominated the landscape in shallow swamp-like forests of the Carboniferous period, which was 300 to 350 million years ago. So the vascular plants developed. These plants, after the life cycle was completed, they died. These dead plants did not completely decay in the stagnant water. An organic rubble called peat accumulated. So see how we see the further development. What are these plants? Always remember, these plants are having the sun's energy. These plants are having the solar energy trapped into them in the form of the carbohydrates, which is the main source of energy which we get coming from the sun. So these dead plants, when these plants died, when they were, that is when the life cycle was completed, the plants died, but they did not completely decay. And in the stagnant water where they were decomposing, peat was formed. PEAT, peat was formed, which is called the organic rubble which accumulated, which was acted upon by the dead organisms, and the partial decaying was occurring. Then the swamps were there. All this is near the water only which is happening. So the swamps were later covered by the sea and marine segments piled on top of the peat. Imagine how it must have happened. The dead plants went to the soil, the marine water covered it, and this peat was piled over by the marine sediments. Heat and pressure gradually converted the peat to coal, which is very important for us as a fuel. So this peat was converted into coal. Thus the name of the geologic period came as Carboniferous. So we call it as Carboniferous because coal formation was there in this, and that only we are getting through these refineries and all that is taken is from the coal, which is the remains of the plants which died millions of years ago and were buried in the form of peat. So this picture, majority of us have seen it. It is a common one, generally given to show how rich the vascular plants were there. These are the ferns. Most of them, you will see the leaves of these ferns look like Nephrolepis, the one which we have commonly growing. Nephrolepis also, we have a number of species. Many are garden plants. So that in this forest, you will see how dense it is. In this small picture itself, you cannot count the number of trees. So many have fallen down, so many are standing up. But this was the condition when in the Jurassic period, when the dinosaurs were becoming dominant, these vascular plants also were becoming dominant. So here further we see angiosperms first evolved in the late Jurassic period, when much of the southern part of Gondwana was still together. Again, remember the Gondwana part, as I said, it is the region where most of the fossils are obtained. Now also, if you do the excavation, you will be getting most of these fossils in this Gondwana area only. So these angiosperms which evolved, they came into this Gondwana period in the late Jurassic period. In this Jurassic, remember again, the dinosaurs were dominating. After Jurassic, these were, that is, they went to extinction. So we see that late Jurassic period, this Gondwana was still intact, and these were thought to have evolved in highland mountains of central Gondwana parts, of which are now South Africa, South America, Antarctica, India, and Australia. So these 5 continents which we see now were together, and here the angiosperms developed. Not in the other part, remember, not in Eurasia. They were developing here more towards the equatorial region. That part comes towards the equatorial region where the conditions are hot and moist, which is favorable for the plants to grow. So again, this diversity took place according to the surrounding, according to the climate, according to the availability of the resources. These plants further evolved. So these angiosperms, these evolved in the Gondwana area, central Gondwana area on the highland mountain. Evolution during the late Mesozoic era and entire Cenozoic era takes place in the context of all these continents moving apart. So when the continental drift took place, these moved apart and thereby separating many different groups of flowering plants that evolved independently on the different continents. So we have similarities, but still as they move apart, because of the climatic condition, we get the diversity of the plants in all these 5 continents. All are not same, though they are coming from Gondwana. Similarities are there. As I said, Gondwana, the tribe which was living there was the Gond tribe, which we have in India, in the MP, Madhya Pradesh, where we see this Gondwan or the Gond people were there in all these continents. So they must be having some different name now, which are there in the other continent, but the roots, that is the genetic constitution, might be similar to these, with some changes, of course. With the years that have passed, the adaptations which take place, it varies. So here we see the next, that is the ferns. The ferns again, as I mentioned, for the bryophytes, ferns also have the alternation of generation. The gametophyte is there, sporophyte is there, but we see a further step toward diploidy becoming more dominant. Haploid stage is microscopic, not like bryophytes. Bryophytes, haploid stage is still very much there. Sporophyte is dependent on gametophyte. But when we come to pteridophyte, the gametophyte, the haploid stage becomes limited. It is tiny, microscopic, while the sporophyte, the big giant ferns were there. There are some giant ferns we still get. Cyathea, which is there, it is still there. We get it in various, in the different countries. And we also have it in Kerala, where we get these Cyathea, the big ferns which are there. Now in the second picture, you will notice these ferns, majority of them on their ventral surface of the leaflet. The leaves are very large. So leaflets are there, which are generally pinnately compound. On this ventral surface, you see these brown spots. So the entire plant remains diploid only. That haploid condition in the diploid condition becomes limited to that small brown structure, which is called as the sorus, which is a group of sporangia which develop the spores. So see how we are going towards diploidy. From haploidy to diploidy, diversity is taking place. Haploid is not growing very well. The structure is small, it is stunted because only one set of chromosome. When two sets of chromosomes come, it becomes more stable. For division also, for mitosis, for meiosis, the division becomes easy. So meiosis takes place generally, you must be knowing that the chromosome numbers have to be even, where same equal number has to go to the opposite poles, or the cell, the nucleus will not be remaining functional. So that we see the sori, which is having the haploid condition, the spore will be formed, which will form the gametophyte. Then we come to the next group, that is the cycas. The cycads here in the picture, gymnosperms we can say. One of them is the cycas here. We'll see a little later again gymnosperms. So this cycas is again having more characters or more adaptation for desert condition. That is storing water. The leaves are tough, dark green, and they have a waxy coating, thick cuticle. All these are desert adaptations, and they form the cones. So they are commonly called, all of them are the, majority of them are the coniferous, cone forming gymnosperms. And then we come to the angiosperms, the beautiful flowering plants that we get today. In these also numerous plants are there, numerous flowers are there, numerous adaptations are there, which is diversity, which last time when Dr. Amol had taken the lecture, he had mentioned that you have to notice when the bird is feeding or the insect is feeding or any other organism is feeding, you have to know what is the feeding material for them. For that, we have to know how the plant is. So then, as I said, the pteridophytes have the spores developing in the sorus. The gymnosperms have the cone in which develop the pollen grains, in which develop the ovule. Again, these are gymnosperms are the plants that are the seed growing plants. We'll see them further again. So now, little coming to the end of this, what we have? Theory. So this evolution took place, as we mentioned, from a simple single cell to a complex multicellular structure. So this is defined, this organic evolution definition. Most of you are knowing because it has been taught from the beginning that it is a very slow process that we saw how millions of years took place to come to today's stage, from the condition to the last, that is the Cenozoic condition. So organic evolution can be defined as a slow, gradual. It doesn't happen in one day. It takes millions of years to take place, and it is continuous. Continuously it is happening. Now also changes are taking place. We do not know how the next part will be seen, because from one to another continuously changes are occurring. So this again is a matter of research where the changes are occurring and we can see how the adaptations might take place. So gradual, continuous, irreversible. It will not go back. Once a new structure is formed, it will never go back to its original state. We will not go again to one unicellular condition. We'll be getting more and more complexity as we see, or simplicity also, but not to single cell, but in adaptations. So it is irreversible change through which the present day complex forms have descended or evolved from the simple pre-existing forms of the past. So this, each part is having important, remember each word is important, which is slow, gradual, continuous, irreversible change. So this is very important, and you can see the point of research at every word which is there in the definition. Then, according to some, there is a panspermia theory or cosmozoic theory, where it was believed that the organisms, the living matter, the living beings, they came from this space. They are coming from some meteor or they are coming from some comet. As it is passing, when the rubble falls off, it is thought that it landed on the earth and the conditions were favorable, so it started growing here. So that is the panspermia theory or the cosmozoic theory. Especially in the Western countries, most of them believe in this panspermia theory, where it is believed that it is coming from outside. But we have been all the time studying the theory by Darwin. But before Darwin, we got a Lamarck theory. Lamarck, who was a French zoologist. He mentioned that use and disuse of organs, the direct effect of environment, the conscious effort toward developing a particular organ, use and disuse of these organs was inherited. So this example, which is cited always for Lamarck's theory, is giraffe that has a long neck, because the lower part was not having any grass or the matter for grazing. It had to go for browsing. And that browsing was done at a higher level where other animals could not reach. So there was no competition. Once that giraffe got a long neck, it could go to the top, go to a higher level and browse and get its nourishment. So according to Lamarck, it was mentioned that continuous use, continuous stretching of the neck made the neck long. So continuous use and disuse. If you don't use the organ, it is going to be perished. It will be no more. But if you use it, it will be becoming more and more functional. So there are drawbacks. That is, it doesn't prove everything. So we always go for our Darwin theory, which is of the origin of species. Origin of species by natural selection, where from a single cell we come to the multicellular structure. So here again various points are there. The prodigality, struggle for existence, all leading to another, all leading to the next step. Variations in heredity, survival of the fittest, on which acts the natural selection, on which comes the origin species. So prodigality, every organism produces number of spores, number of seeds, especially in plants we see, because the mortality rate is high. They are not very sure and they want their race to continue. They want that all the offsprings should be there. That is, the race should continue and they should survive. So large number of spores are formed, but all do not germinate. The viability is there, the competition is there. So there is struggle for existence. Every organism requires shelter, every organism requires food, and every organism requires mate. That finding mate is very important when it comes to sexual reproduction. Asexual, single parent can give rise to the offsprings. But asexual is not successful that much because same genetic material goes on continuing and there are very less variations. For evolution, variations are essential. Unless variations are there, evolution cannot take place because these variations help in adaptation. The organism can adapt to the surroundings so that it can go on modifying itself according to the requirement, according to the necessity. And this is then given to the next generation by heredity. So these changes, they have to occur in the reproductive part, in the germ cells, that is the cells which give rise to the gametes. Then only it will be passed on to the next generation. If it is in the somatic cell, it is going to die with that organism and it will not be continuing. So that is also important, where variations are there and they are given to the next generation by heredity. And in this, always there is competition. There is survival of the fittest, the one who is best to cope up with the surroundings, with whatever is happening, with whatever endemics are there, with whatever epidemics are there. those who are well adapted or having the capacity to survive in these adverse conditions will be surviving. So we see that natural selection occurs on this, and then we get a new species form, which is called as the origin of species. Then after Darwin, we come to the mutation theory given by Hugo de Rice, where according to him that some of the cells, especially of course it has to be reproductive cell, the certain changes are there in the genetic makeup which causes mutation, and because of this mutation new organism develops. This then gives rise to a structure similar to itself. The mutated form gives rise to a structure similar to itself, and then it is continued. So according to him, origin of species took place due to mutation, which is called as mutation theory, which is seen in the evening primrose, the plant commonly cited, that is the Enothera lamarckiana, when he found the change in the new species or formation of new species. But we generally follow the Darwin's theory of evolution, that is origin of species. So this we see that this part where the phytoplanktons are there, the planktons which are in the water, the various larval stages of the aquatic organisms, the cyclops and all that we see, many are there. If you take one drop of water, as I said, on the slide, you will see so many of them, so much diversity is there in these organisms, and every time you tend or you are bound to get a new one. So again, we can't say that this one was there earlier, which has continued, or it is a new species which has formed. That is a mutation taking place, a change in the structure taking place of the genetic material. So then next we come to the classification, which I want you to know about the diversity, how it took place. Again, we are always remember when we are talking now, this topic is mainly biodiversity. So we are for biodiversity project, we are doing this. So you, whatever we are saying, whatever I am saying, you have to remember it with the context. Though it comes like an evolution part, a story part, it is with context to the biodiversity which you see. So now the plant kingdom, we get divided into sub-kingdoms, the cryptogamy and the phanerogamy. So this plant kingdom, why the plant kingdom is there? The plant kingdom as such is there where all the plants are there that are autotrophic. They can perform their own, that is, they can get their own food material, get their own nutrition from the solar energy. So again, remember, sun is the source, solar energy, because of which plant kingdom is there. So this plant kingdom, of course, they do not have any locomotion. So as mentioned earlier, when the division of labor took place, the first filament was formed, it was anchored, it was on the substratum. The holdfast was attached to the substratum, and later then the root system came. Because the root system is there, the plants are in the soil where they get their raw food material. Prepared food material is by the leaves which are above. But the raw food material, they have to be close to the soil surface, which they got from their ancestors, which were in the sea, which were there in the water. So plants remain rooted to the soil. While the animals, they were moving about in water also. They never stayed in the beginning. Of course, we have the earlier stages, the porifera, the coelenterata, they are attached to the substratum. All were not free floating. Sponges were not free floating at all. But the coelenterate, some of them became free floating, and after this then we see there are the changes. Only one bifurcation took place where Platyhelminthes was formed, where the parasites were there. So that we leave aside. What we are seeing is the plant kingdom became rooted because of the condition that they require the raw food material. Because they are going to prepare their own food material, this was necessary. That raw food material is made available, that was utilized to form the prepared food material with the help of sunlight. So that the rooting condition became that is a must for these plants. And then we say the plant kingdom, all the plants that are having, that do not have any locomotion, and all the plants that perform their own photosynthesis and are autotrophic. So the cryptogamy and phanerogamy, most of them we see are the Latin words and the Greek words. I always say, if it was here, actually in our earlier literature also we get this, it would have been in Sanskrit. But because this was followed, we are following it in the Latin and the Greek language. So we have the cryptos and gamos. Cryptos, the cryptos word we still use, cryptic. Generally it is used for the puzzles, for the riddles, for the crosswords. Cryptic, hidden gametes, not seen by the naked eyes. Microscopes were needed, very tiny and fast moving. So cryptogamy. And phaneros, phaneros visible, the gametes easily seen. You can see the pollen grain, you can see the ovule in the fruit, in the ovary. So the cryptogamy and the phanerogamy. Now cryptogamy, also called as the non-flowering plants, we should have three of them: the thallophyta, bryophyta, and the pteridophyta. The words we used earlier. Again, see, from simple to complex we are going. From water, which is there, the thallophytes, where root system was not there. All the plant body same, all cells performing all functions. Such a plant body is called as a thallus, again a Latin word from which the term thallophyta is there. Then we get the bryophytes, amphibians, more towards land, but still in vicinity of water. They cannot go beyond that, they will dry up. But still, they are protected by the cuticle, where the gametophyte is dominant, sporophyte is short-living. Thallophyta, gametophyte is major, sporophyte only by one cell. Pteridophyta, gametophyte short-living, sporophyte well-developed. So these three we get. And then further what we see, the thallophytes, we get three types: algae, fungi, and the lichens. As I mentioned, fungi has now been removed from the plant kingdom. We'll be getting algae, lichens, they are the composite plants having both the algae and the fungi helping one another. Fungi helping in the anchoring, algae helping in getting the food material. Then we come to the phanerogamy, the visible gamete part, also called as the flowering plants, where we see the gymnospermy and the angiospermy. So remember again, the gymnosperms, they started developing in the Mesozoic era. They became dominant along with the dinosaurs, and then came the angiosperms. So first came the gymnospermy, then the angiospermy, and then we get to the dicot and the monocot. If you will notice the arrow, notice the arrow of the dicot and monocot. The dicot arrow is short, monocot arrow is long. So dicots are primitive, monocots are advanced. So here again we see advancement is there. So monocots are considered to be more successful in the case of number. More number of monocots you will get than that of the dicot. The dicot number is comparatively less. Organism is called successful when their number is large. Just like we will say the virus, which is troubling now, it is more successful because its number is very large, multiplying at a very fast rate. Then we see, I want you to look at this at in a little different angle. So what we see, the plant kingdom, again the same thing, but what are we going to see? The cellular plants and the vascular plants. So cellular plants where only cells are there, where we see that in the bryophytes part. The three groups that we see, the bryophyte parts till the mosses, only cells are there, no vascularization is there. But as we come to the vascular plants, we see again two forms, the spore producing forms and the seed producing forms. What is the difference? The spore is haploid and the seed is diploid. So this is more dominant than that of the spore producing plants. So these commonly we see the spore producing plants where we are going to see the club mosses, then we see the equisetum and all horsetails, and then we see the ferns. And the seed producing, we get the non-flowering, which are the gymnosperms, and the flowering, which are the angiosperms. Now in the gymnosperms, again gymnosperms did not develop very much. The evolution stopped here, which commonly we have only the conifers. Mainly the conifers are there, which are the pinus and the cycas, the cycads. They form the gymnosperms. And the next one we see, that is the ginkgo. The ginkgo biloba is considered to be the transition stage between the gymnosperm and the angiosperm. So what we are seeing here now, again remember, from primitive to complexity, the diversity is seen changing, where we are seeing the vascular plants, and when we come to the seed bearing plants, the gymnosperms, you see these three, as I mentioned, the pinus, cycas, and the ginkgo. In this ginkgo, one more thing we have to remember, that the xylem which is there, the xylem, the vascular tissue which developed, the initial tissue was primitive. Only tubular cells elongated, placed one above the other, having thick walls. That was very important for the conduction of food material. But these tracheids, they were polygonal in shape. So there was some friction in the transport of food material. So this ginkgo plant, how it is a climber. Like we see, the stem is very much elongated. And here we get the formation of vessels. That is, the xylem vessels are there, which are round in shape. You can consider that a polygonal shape having angles and a circular shape like a pipe, which will be more efficient. The one which is circular is more efficient in conducting, which we see also in monocots. Dicots still, they have tracheids. Vessels are there only in climbers, where they have to go very long, travel a long distance, where the food has to be transported from one end to another. So the climbers have vessels and the monocots have vessels. Why monocots have vessels? Because the internodes are very long and the food has to be transported from one internode to another. It has to be done rapidly also, because most of the monocots are seasonals. They have to complete their life cycle in a short period. So see how the transition took place from the tracheids to the vessel. And as I mentioned, ginkgo is the transitional stage between gymnosperm and angiosperm. It is having majority of the characters of gymnosperm, but still it is having the characters of angiosperms also, where one more thing we have to notice, that in these primitive plants, there is no venation. Venation is not there. In cycas and all, you will notice there is transfusion tissue from where the food material is conducted. Few cells in the middle become differentiated and they do that function. But in ginkgo, we see the venation started, which we get further in the angiosperms, where you will see the reticulate venation and the parallel venation, which is very important to know, which is that of the dicot and which is that of the monocot. So all these we have to know when we are doing the diversity, when we are studying, because according to this, many a times we get the differentiations in these plants, and the certain butterflies and certain insects, they prefer a certain type of venation for them to have a perch, to take up the sap from it. So all this becomes important to know how this is happening. So again, as I said, see the changes that took place from the thin walled to the thicker wall, but all the cells did not become thick. The ones which were necessary only became thick. The cells of the conducting tissue, only xylem, not the phloem, and the supporting tissue, that is the sclerenchyma. So these cells were lignified. They got the lignin, the special polymer which was formed in the course of evolution, and we see them growing further. So here then we see the angiosperms further modified into the monocots and the dicots. The single cotyledon in the seed and the double cotyledon in the seed. So again, it is found that the single cotyledon seed becomes more successful because here the food material is more in the form of endosperm. If you think of the maize grain, all that yellow part which you see is the endosperm, which is the nourishing tissue until becomes established. While in the dicots, there are two cotyledons which are fleshy. Most of them are fleshy. Very few examples having a thin-walled cotyledons. Now, the recent classification, this also I want you to note from point of view of the diversity. So what we see here, this is called as the, earlier that we saw was a two kingdom classification, which was more used in the earlier days. Now it is given as 5 kingdom classification. This 5 kingdom classification became essential because of the first step, that is the Monera. In the Monera, the nucleus, the cell is prokaryotic. That is, the nucleus is not well defined. It doesn't have a nuclear membrane. The genetic material is just scattered into the cytoplasm. And in this, we get the viruses and the bacteria and the cyanobacteria, where the nuclear material is not enclosed in a nuclear envelope. Also, the cell wall, normally what we see, the cell wall, if it is there, it is made up of cellulose in the higher plants. But here, it is not made up of cellulose. It is a polysaccharide only. It is a carbohydrate. But in that, amino acids are also incorporated, which makes it tough. And they can survive in any adverse condition. It may be very hot, it may be very cold, doesn't matter. This amino acid added to this polysaccharide makes the cell wall very tough and they can survive. That is what we see in the viruses also. Mode of nutrition, some of them are autotrophs. Very few bacteria are autotrophs, like the sulfur bacteria, etc. Most of them are heterotrophs, saprophytes or the parasites. They might be pathogenic, non-pathogenic. Majority, we have so many bacteria in our body which are non-pathogenic, helpful to us. So that also we have to remember. And multicellularity is absent in Monera. Now this Monera, where we say we get viruses, so earlier viruses did not have any status. If you look at the classification which we see earlier, viruses did not have any status because viruses were not known. They were there, very much there from the beginning, but they were not known. The existence became known only after the discovery of electron microscope. And that electron microscope was discovered after Second World War. So after the Second World War, then when the organisms were studied further, the virus, the existence of the virus came to be known, and then the further all that we know how they are studied, and the plant virus and the animal virus and the different, some have the genetic material RNA, some have DNA, how they infect, how simple they have the body, how they cannot function outside the host of the body, how they have a particular cell as a host, all that was studied later, afterwards, after the discovery of the electron microscope. So then Monera was given a status which was taken as kingdom. The virus also were included in it, where the nuclear material is there, but all the other characters which we see is applicable to it. Then comes the protista. Again, protista is taken where the cell is eukaryotic, nucleus is well defined, nuclear envelope is there. But earlier how it was? In the plant kingdom, euglena was taken. Some took it in the animal kingdom along with the protozoa. But then again, it has its chloroplast. So it is autotrophic. So then protista group was there, where all single cell organisms are there. Whichever single cell or one cell, that means it is protista. Eukaryotic, well-defined nucleus, nuclear envelope is present. Cell wall present in some forms. As I said, where the plant condition is there, autotrophic condition is there, you will get the cell wall. Otherwise, again, if it is amoeba, it is a naked mass, where you will not get the cell wall. Mode of nutrition, again, if chloroplast is there, autotrophic, photosynthetic, or it will be heterotrophic or combination, depending what stage it is there. Multicellularity absent because it is one cell. So Protista, all unicellular in Protista. Then we get again fungi removed from Plantae. Fungi have been given the status of kingdom because they are very much different entities. And again, as you know, the fungi, they are having, most of them are having medicinal importance. We are using them for our different antibiotics, etc. So fungi is a different entity. Really, it is actually, that is eukaryotic, having a nuclear envelope. Again, see here, there is a difference in the cell wall. There is no cellulose, there is chitin. This chitin is a tough material which is also seen in the animals, the lower animals, in the invertebrate animals. You will see this chitin material which is protective, tough, doesn't get degraded easily. So that it continues, the organism continues to live for a long time when it is having this chitin covering along it. Then it is heterotroph, where no photosynthesis, no green pigment, not a single one has it. So it is an absorptive heterotroph, means what? It simplifies the food material from the host. It will secrete enzymes. It has that property, again, see here how it is. That fungi has its property of the enzymes which it can secrete. It will simplify the food material on which it is growing, whether it be a parasite, whether it be a saprophyte. It will first simplify the food material that is absorbed and used by the organism. So it is having a different term, see, it is called as absorptive heterotroph. Multicellularity is there. Unicellular are very few in the fungi. Most of them are multicellular. And the again variations are there in it, from where we see the Phycomycetes to Basidiomycetes. The changes take place, advancement take place as the evolution is there from the simple fungi to the complex fungi. So fungi has been given a kingdom status. Then comes the Plantae. Plantae, as we know, a large group. In this algae are there. The algae which are studied, they come in Plantae only. They are not given separate status. They are autotrophs. So that they are eukaryotes. The nuclear membrane is present. Cell wall is made up of cellulose. And other polysaccharides, means hemicellulose, pectin is there many times, which is helping the plant to survive in aquatic medium or in the dry conditions. So cellulose is the major one, with the other components also. Nutrition, photosynthetic. These are our survivors. These are the ones which help us to survive, giving us the solar energy. So very much useful for us. So photosynthetic, and it is present in all forms. That is, you get mostly multicellular. But when you come to algae, you will see that they are unicellular. So all forms are there in Plantae. Consider, remember, algae to flowering plants. Animals, they are eukaryotic, nuclear membrane present, cell wall absent. Look at the nutrition. Ingestive heterotroph. These terms are very important. Absorptive heterotroph and ingestive heterotroph. Animals eat the food, ingest it, and they cannot prepare their own food material, so they are dependent on the others for their, so they are heterotrophs, but they are ingestive. They cannot absorb it from the entire part of the body. They have to put it in some opening. That is, for us, it is the mouth. Most of the animals have the mouth from where it is taken in and it is digested. Multicellularity in all. Again, here we see the unicellular. In the earlier group, protozoa was unicellular, but here it is removed. It is there in the Protista now. So here eukaryotic, we begin from Porifera. Porifera onwards, you will get the kingdom Animalia, which is there seen in the 5 kingdom classification. So remember this classification also, along with the 2 kingdom classification, we have to remember this: Monera, Protista, fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. Okay. So this is a simpler form I like this chart. So I thought I will show it to you of the 5 kingdom classification. Here, see what they have taken. They have started with organism. So no plant or no animal like that. It is started just with organism. So all are there in it. And in those organisms, the 2 groups, prokaryotes and the eukaryotes. Prokaryotes, we saw them, all the bacteria, cyanobacteria, the viruses, prokaryotes. Eukaryotes, again we get unicellular, multicellular. Unicellular protista, it has stopped. No more development. Multicellular, again we have 2, with cell wall, without cell wall. With cell wall, we have do not perform photosynthesis fungi, perform photosynthesis plantae, and without cell wall, we have animalia. So look at this chart. It is so simple, but so descriptive. You get the entire picture, how the organisms are divided, how diversity is seen from the prokaryotes to the eukaryotes. Not well-defined nucleus, well-defined nucleus, and then further. So this we see the classification of the organisms. So whatever we are going to study, whatever we are going to see in nature. So I would suggest that you can see whenever you go out in all this chart where your organism is fitting, in which part it is fitting. We see everything. We see everything in the nature. When you go out in the house also, we see everything. So many of them are there living with us, which we have to know that they are living with us, taking the food material from us, and also helping us or damaging us also. So that it all gives the biodiversity picture that we know after looking at this chart. Okay, so with this we come to end with the evolutionary history of the plants, where we go into the flora in the next one. That is the next one. This I wanted to show you the last slide. Look at the virus and look at the magnolia. So what we see here in this much picture, the virus organisms entities are how many? 3, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Only in this much picture you are saying 11 of them, while in this picture you get only one flower of magnolia. So the number is large of these microorganisms, and we study from virus to the large plants, the dominant plants. As I said, the monocots are more dominant than the dicots. So